On today's show, we preview the UFC 240 main event between reigning UFC Featherweight champion Max Blessed Holloway and former UFC lightweight champ Frankie "The Answer" Edgar.
Max Holloway has defended his undisputed featherweight championship.
After back-to-back defences of his featherweight belt, Max Holloway laid siege on the lightweight division seeking double gold, but was denied by the now interim champion Dustin Poirier. For this battle, he returns to his throne at 145, where he looks to defend his title for a third time.
Hawaii, stand up!
Air King gotta defend his throne, come see me!
Looking to overthrow the Hawaiian stands the fighting pride of New Jersey, Frankie Edgar, who boasts more octagon time than any other athlete in UFC history. And after more than a year out of competition, Edgar will be determined to show that he has all the answers against a champion blessed with featherweight gold. Hello and welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon. John Gooden alongside Dan Hardy as usual. Today we are talking about the main event for the big pay-per-view, UFC 240. This one for the featherweight gold honours. We have the defending champion Max Holloway taking on Frankie Edgar. Dan, fascinating lead up to this one with Frankie being away for about a year. Max Holloway has been in action recently, but he had a failed bid at £155. What are you making of this setup?
Well, it's been coming for a long time. You know, it's amazing that these guys' paths haven't crossed in the past. You know, with
third time lucky.
I know, right? And with Frankie Edgar being around for so long, he's been a perennial contender in every division that he's been in. Max Holloway's risen through the rankings so quickly, and he's maintained the featherweight belt without ever having to defend against Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes sense that this fight had to happen. It's almost like Amanda Nunes taking on Holly Holm. Like, to beat Holly Holm, she's kind of beaten the last person that she needs to be qualified as the best.
Yeah.
And I think that's the situation with Frankie Edgar. It's the one thing that Max Holloway doesn't have on his record. Yeah,
that other blue chip name. So, great. Well, let's put them side by side, shall we? Take a look at the facts and the stats. And we know about the physical stature of Max Holloway. Frankie Edgar's always fighting taller fighters, so I don't feel there's a big point to look at there. But one thing I think is quite interesting is 10 years apart, but doesn't look like there's 10 years of work between them, does it?
Which is crazy because, you know, we feel like we've seen Frankie Edgar so much, and obviously Max has had a lot of fights in the UFC, but Frankie's been around for so long. It is a bit of a change in the guard here, but it's good that Frankie gets an opportunity to fight Max and just to make sure that fight happens, because if it never did, we'd all be missing something. And
just one point to add a layer to what you were saying about the changing of the guard. Now we truly see Max Holloway as this featherweight king. Mm-hmm. It was dominated so long by Aldo, but we see now the most wins and finishes in that featherweight division. I mean, there's no denying this guy. No, there's not.
And I mean, his stats speak for themselves, but then again, so do Frankie Edgar's. You know, you look most fight time in UFC history. That's not a weight class. That's everybody in the UFC that's ever fought in the UFC. And we're talking about 5-round fights against BJ Penn and Gray Maynard and, you know, some of the greats at lightweight, a weight class above.
Yeah.
And they still talk about Frankie might be able to make bantamweight, which is crazy thinking he might have been 2 weight classes above and still the champion.
That's just because his skill set's so good.
Skills pay the bills, John.
And we're going to be looking at how he pays the bills with all of his skills. Well, let's start with Frankie then, shall we? And I sort of mentioned Jose Aldo. You're talking about the body of work. I think what's quite interesting about this is it's a fresh look at challenging for the title for Frankie, who's not Jose Aldo, because he kind of showed that he had his number. But we have many questions. Does Holloway have Frankie's number?
Well, this is the question. And I think, you know, stylistically, this is a very interesting matchup because of the way that Frankie fights and the pace that he can put on Max Holloway. That's the difference between Frankie and Aldo, I would say. See, Aldo fights at a pace, he takes his time, he builds up, very much like Max Holloway does. So their outputs effectively mirrored each other on the way through the fight, and Holloway was always able to get the better because he's taller, faster, his striking's more dynamic, which is something I want to talk about in a little while. But the difference is that, you know, Frankie can put everything together, and he can put everything together from the first round and go all the way into the championship rounds without really slowing down. And I think that is the kryptonite for Max Holloway. It's someone that can get ahead on the scorecards early. It's someone that can start that first round as they mean to go on for the rest of the fight. You know, this pressure that he put on Cub Swanson is what we really need to see against Max Holloway, making Max Holloway uncomfortable and fight at the pace that Frankie Edgar wants to set. You know, like this kind of pressure, this aggression, especially for someone that was coming off a knockout, it kind of blows my mind a little bit that he was pushing forward on Cub Swanson that's got such heavy hands, another veteran of the division, and started to add more low kicks into his game as well, which I think will be a benefit in this fight.
For sure.
You know, being on the front foot of Max Holloway, forcing him against the fence, will force him to either move, as we're seeing with Cub Swanson, or try and counter. But both of those things will be done on Frankie Edgar's terms because he's the one that's setting the pace. So if he forces Max to start at Frankie Edgar's pace in the first round, that's when Max may not be able to pick up as the fight goes on. He may be forced to give his best in the first couple of rounds and then start to peter off and slow down. We just don't know. The difference is, though, that Frankie can test that, and I don't think there's been another featherweight in division that can do that.
And you were mentioning that pressure and that Frankie brings it early, but I guess if you had to summarise Holloway, he's a pressure fighter too. But then we noticed that they do it in different phases of the fight.
Yes, well, we've spoken about Max Holloway's stats and how not only does his punch count increase as the fight goes on, but his accuracy increases as the fight goes on. There's a reason for this. The first reason is that he doesn't feel a rush to start the first round fast. Sometimes he can be aggressive in the first round, but if you watch him, he's not throwing a barrage of punches in the first round. A lot of it is this kind of stuff, where he's in and out of range, he'll test with a feint, he'll offer his head, see what you want to throw. All of this time, at least the first round or two, and he did the same thing with Aldo twice, he downloads, he studies, he watches his opponent, and he reads their movement patterns. So when he does start to pick his pace up, it's a far more calculated pressure, which is why his work rate goes up as well as his success rate, because he knows that when he's throwing the punches, the targets are there to land because he's already made those reads. So the benefit in the first round of Frankie coming at him is that gives Max Holloway a lot of stuff to read, a lot of information to download and absorb ready for the later rounds.
I think one thing that you've essentially said then is that Max Holloway is like the high-width fibre optic broadband of fighting, downloading all of this information and then reacting on what he's seeing. A very intelligent fighter, as we've seen how he's solving a lot of these riddles. But let's not belittle the skill set of Frankie Edgar here, a true mixed martial artist who, for me, has been working with a lot of very new breed, very dynamic style fighters like Zabit Magomedsharipov. And so he's getting those reps and he's used to seeing a lot more stuff now. I think he's a very well-rounded fighter.
I think you're right. I think he is. And I think he's always been a well-rounded fighter. And you say, he's a true mixed martial artist. That is the way that I view Frankie Edgar. He was one of the first MMA fighters in a sport of purists. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because he was able to do everything. There's not a range where Frankie Edgar can't exploit if it's a weakness in his opponent.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to Max Holloway is a striker that's built everything under his game down. He's a striker, he's got takedown defense, and then he's got his guillotines and stuff after that, which is all stuff that's added afterwards. Edgar, on the other hand, as a great wrestler, he's bolted striking on, he's bolted submissions on, he's added everything to his game.
He could step into a boxing match, on the wrestling match, or a jiu-jitsu tournament and do super good in all of those.
Wouldn't be uncomfortable in any range, in any scenario. And that is why, when you watch Frankie Edgar's fights, and, even going back into history, when you watch, say, against BJ Penn, like, he was the MMA fighter in this. BJ Penn's a good boxer, a really good boxer, an amazing jiu-jitsu player. But Frankie was able to put everything together to a point where BJ was never able to get started. So his ability to transition from striking to wrestling and back to striking again is really where I see him putting the pressure on Max Holloway. Pace is obviously a big thing. Toughness might be a big thing as well in those first couple of rounds because he is going to have to walk through some fire. But if he's able to stitch things together, works a takedown, come straight up to punches, back in on the takedown, back up to punches. Look at this against Cub Swanson, drives into the fence. As soon as he realises Cub's defending it, he's back to boxing. But the difference is, in that moment, Cub Swanson's thinking about defending. This is the perfect example. I mean, just watch this. So Gray Maynard, an excellent wrestler and a really, really heavy-handed boxer. The difference in this fight, and a huge human being in comparison to Frankie. I've trained with Gray. He's a monster. He's a big, thick, strong individual. You put him next to Frankie, and there's a clear size advantage for him. But the difference here is that Frankie could put everything together in a way that Gray couldn't deal with in that moment. So Gray's boxing. And then as soon as he sees Frankie level changing, he switches over to wrestling, and now he's wrestling. But once he's in that wrestling zone, and he's dealing with Frankie here, he's thinking wrestling, and then Frankie's straight back to striking. Before Gray's even switched off his wrestling brain and gone back to striking defence, he's already been hit and knocked down. And this is where I feel like Frankie will exploit holes in Holloway's game. Because if you just strike with Holloway, I would say he's got a disadvantage. If he's just trying to wrestle Holloway, he's going to be defending takedowns and he's going to be defending neck attacks all the time. But if he starts to add everything together, if he starts to go level change to a single leg, to an overhand, to a level change, to a kick, that's where Holloway's brain may not work quick enough as a purist striker with other MMA elements to his game. It might not work quite as quick as an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, he really is a genius. Between those sections of striking, wrestling and his groundwork, those gaps in between, Frankie's always been so very good in those spaces.
All the seams have been erased. That's what's beautiful about it.
Seamless,
Absolutely.
Lovely. Well, we're talking about purists then, and I guess if you categorise Max Holloway as essentially a striking purist, he really has taken that side of the game to another level. And we've seen this evolution. It's been so good for us to watch this play out from a young man, 19, all the way through to present day. And the way that he just dismantled Jose Aldo and that legacy that he'd created, it just came tumbling in a way, didn't it? At the time, he was the best. And that's why there's no denying he's just the best that we've seen at this weight class.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we have to not only focus on what he's already done, but what he's capable of in comparison to the people that he's fought. So Aldo, one of the best featherweights of all time, no doubt about it.
Of course.
He was excellent in every range. His takedown defence was ridiculous. We know he's got a ground game as well, even though he doesn't really need to use it. His striking is phenomenal. But again, compared to Frankie Edgar, it's very fundamentally sound in his striking. Like, if you watch Aldo, he's always in an orthodox stance. He throws his strikes really nice and his low kicks nice. He's got good technique on everything he does. But he doesn't throw a lot of spinning attacks. He doesn't switch his stance. Do you know what I mean? There are some things that Max Holloway does really well that these other guys in the division, we've not seen them do at all.
Yeah.
Because although Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo and people like that, they are mixed martial artists, the purist in Max Holloway has allowed him to focus so much on his striking game that he's been able to take it to a whole new level. Like, you watch the way that Max puts these strikes together, like backing people up against the fence, working nice tight shots inside, then chaining stuff together that you just wouldn't expect. It's the spinning attacks and those kind of things. It's just so difficult to predict. And then, you know, we know that the stance switching's a benefit. He's southpaw here, but then he steps in and he switches straight to orthodox there. And I call him a purist as a striker. That's more because he favours striking over everything else.
I know what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like Royce Gracie was a jiu-jitsu purist with no striking at all.
Yeah.
Damian Maia was a jiu-jitsu purist with some striking. The difference here is Max Holloway's a striker with loads of good takedown defence and some other options on the side.
Yes.
The difference is, instead of being Royce Gracie and building your ground game up and stopping there, or being Damian Maia and building your ground game up and then adding a bit more on top, Holloway started at the top and worked down. And he's been so effective at that it's allowed him to really develop his striking game to levels where other people can't keep up.
Yeah.
You know?
Fascinating, Dan. I know you've got loads more to say on this one, but we must go to a break. When we come back, loads more. Hello and welcome back to UFC Inside the Octagon. In part one, we spoke about the two different types of pressure fighters we have in this title contest. Also, the very mixed martial arts game of Frankie Edgar and the really superior striking that we've seen from Max Holloway. Time now to move on to Frankie's wrestling, Dan. Div 1 wrestler, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But when you look at his stats, they're not glowing, but that only really tells us half the story, doesn't it?
It does, because Frankie, as I said in the first playlist, it's more about pace than anything for Frankie Edgar. And oftentimes he's fighting guys that are very good wrestlers, that are often stronger than him or bigger than him, but he has a pace. So he has to use multiple takedowns to get the point made, to get the fight to the floor.
Yeah.
And I would say that there are some facets to his wrestling game that are going to be more beneficial for him than others in this fight. Think about this. If he's shooting on Max Holloway, the first thing he's going to hit is really good takedown defense. Once he's hit takedown defense and they're struggling with that, then he comes onto the guillotine attacks of Max Holloway, which I want to discuss in a minute as well. They're the two lines of defense for Max Holloway in this one. Frankie has to work around both of those things. He has to protect his neck, and he has to do that by probably not shooting. I would much rather him work his body locks, because for me, this is the best part of his wrestling game. chaining things together. That's how he's going to be taking Max Holloway down. It's not going to be the first one, maybe not the second or third. It's going to be the hustle. It's going to be the drive to the fence. It's going to be the body lock and the drive over and the stripping of the base away and just charging his opponent to the floor. We've seen him do this so many times. Against Jeremy Stephens, a big, strong fighter in this weight class. Look how he drives him down with this body lock. This is his strongest part of his game, without a doubt, Frankie Edgar. And because he's able to just move around people constantly, especially people that are taller than him, it's easier to get under their armpits. If they've got a narrow waist, it's much easier to spin around them. And I would say Cub Swanson's probably done the best job of trying to stay on his feet against Frankie Edgar, and he just wasn't able to do it. If he's going to get Holloway to the floor, which if he's going to do it, he's got to hustle. It's not going to be an easy process. And I would say the best way to do it is that body lock.
But on the flip side then, and sort of working from that point then, Dan, Holloway's shown the reason why he's such a good striker is because he can keep the fight on the feet. It's not easy to take this man down.
That's it. That's exactly it. He has got excellent, 83% takedown defense.
It's just north of 83, yeah.
He's got great takedown defense, and he's very stubborn in every range as well, even if he does hit the floor. But, like, because he goes crashing forward, a lot of the time people are level changing underneath him. He pressures people so they level change, but they level change on his terms because he's pressuring them.
Right.
I don't think he's going to get that advantage in this fight. I think it will be Frankie Edgar setting the pace. But if Frankie's shooting constantly, if Max defends the first couple of takedowns, immediately he now starts to identify the neck attacks. He starts to realise that the head is going to be in a particular position, and when he feels comfortable he's got his balance, then he's going to start attacking the neck. And when he attacks the neck, he cranks it. I mean, poor old Lamas almost unscrewed his own head there. You know what I mean? And, like, you'll see how he wraps this up against Cub as well. Watch this high elbow. I mean, that is a mean rip there. He just pulls that arm right under the neck of Cub Swanson. And this is a panic tap from Cub. There was also a panic tap against Andre Fili, which we'll see in a second, which tells me that squeeze is really tight.
Yeah.
It comes on very fast. There's a panic to that tap. Like, look at this, elbows, good elbows against Fili, who then level changes on Max Holloway's terms because he doesn't want to be under pressure, and Max Holloway wraps that up. And again, high elbow guillotine, watch how quick the tap is, watch how panicked the tap is. Like, that's a hell of a squeeze.
Yeah.
You know, they're the kind of circumstances that even if the person doesn't tap, if you're squeezing that fast, you can do what Askren did to Lawler and you can just switch him off for a second.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's enough. And I just see Max Holloway being able to, especially if Frankie's being one-dimensional in any way, if he's just trying to wrestle, if he's panic wrestling because he doesn't want to strike, that's going to make that so much easier, which is why Frankie has to maintain an MMA approach in this fight. He has to be aware of those guillotines. You
know, the bottled cap challenge?
Yeah.
You know, Holloway was going to start it with, you know, just twisting. And he said, it's too easy to do. Like, I'm going to do a spinning kick instead. So he's mixing up his martial arts.
There we go.
He's so dynamic. I love this guy. So when we see that from Frankie, the defence is turned into attack from the champ, what answers does he have to come back from?
What answers? Good work, John. I see what you did there. This is the thing. He has answers to all of these circumstances. We've seen them before. Because we know he's going to want to wrestle. When he's wrestling hard, people are going to be attacking his neck, especially if he's able to get takedowns. People start thinking, especially if you're Brian Ortega, you're thinking, if I get a neck here, I'm good. Same thing again with Uriah Faber, someone that's got excellent guillotines. But look how he passes the guard. Again, Yair Rodriguez, big guillotine, lands him on the floor here, and you can see Yair Rodriguez in that moment try and bring Frankie into his guard. I've watched this a bunch of times. Let me show you what happens here. Because Frankie escapes this he uses the momentum of the movement to get his head out of danger. So he's taking Yair Rodriguez down here. So Rodriguez is a tall, rangy fighter that's very dangerous in the striking range. So the smart thing for Frankie to do is to close him down as quickly as possible, to get into the floor where Frankie can nullify the height and do some damage. But the first thing that happens here, he shoots in and he gets caught in a guillotine. So as Yair Rodriguez is trying to crank this guillotine up, Frankie lifts him, he elevates him, but he knows he has to get past the legs, which is why he goes to catch the knee as he's falling. Watch this. So he goes from a grip, he's got a high crotch, he's lifting, but the danger here is if he lands him, this leg of Rodriguez is going to drop to the side and pull him into his guard so he can continue working the choke. So you'll see Frankie's going to switch, he's going to take his right hand and he's going to bring it to the leg of Yair Rodriguez so he can control that. And then as he drives him over, you'll see he's going to try and land on that leg, so it's between his legs, so he's landing in half guard. See how he pulls it between his legs?
Yep.
And he lands on it. this is where Rodriguez tries to make an adjustment, which is really nice, because as he lands, he's got the control of the head. He tries to elevate Frankie with that knee. You see the elevation here. So Rodriguez is now trying to elevate Frankie up in this direction. So this leg here can get the other side of Frankie's body. You can see Frankie's like behind this knee now. He needs to be in between the legs. So Rodriguez is trying to make an adjustment here. So he's kicked Frankie forward. Frankie feels his weight's gone forward and his head's still in danger. So this is where Frankie adapts. And this is something that it's a feel thing. Like we were talking about with Cejudo, it's not a technique, it's a principle. He knows what he needs to do in this circumstance. He can't have his head and his body caught in the same thing. So as Rodriguez goes to catch his body, Frankie uses the momentum, dropping back down from the knee that lifted him, and he just pulls his head out, just pop, as his hips come down. That's just an awareness thing from Frankie Edgar. That's a fundamental understanding of the position that he's in. Same as what we talked about with Henry Cejudo. And then once he's out, once he's escaped that guillotine, the benefit in someone chasing the guillotine is that they have to sit to their back to do it. So now Frankie finds himself in this position where it doesn't matter that he's the shorter fighter, because he uses this beautiful stacking technique. It's just, he bears down on his opponents. We've spoken about this before, I know, but this is an even better shot against Yair Rodriguez that you can see because of the way that he's bearing down on him. So Frankie's standing up. He's standing over his opponent. If you look at Yair Rodriguez in this circumstance, he is crunched up against the fence, very uncomfortable. His head is up against the fence as opposed to one side or the other, which makes it easier for Frankie to stay wide and keep driving into him. So in this circumstance, Yair Rodriguez has got a couple of options. He can either close his guard and pull Frankie in, which means he's staying on the floor, getting ground and pounded, or he tries to create space. The difference is, though, that if he's using his knees to create space from Frankie Edgar, which he is here, the pressure down from Frankie Edgar into Yair Rodriguez's legs is keeping Rodriguez's shoulders pinned to the mat. So that allows Frankie to bear down with his weight from his midsection and strike with his hands and his elbows without them really being able to do a great deal. And he wears people down in this circumstance. Like we saw it against Yair Rodriguez better than anybody, I would say. Like this smashing top game where he just flattens them down all the time. So their main priority is to defend the strikes and to create space with their legs. Now, you know full well, John, if he wants to get up here, he has to get his shoulders to the fence and get his legs underneath him. But he's being hit too much from the top, so he can't do that. And that's the first round. That's 1 5-minute round with Frankie Edgar on top of you. If you go back to your corner and you've got 4 more rounds to do and your eyes already almost swollen shut, that's a game changer. That's what I'm talking about with him starting fast. If he comes out early, he puts a pace on, he might take a couple of shots, but we know he can come through that. We've seen him do it against Gray Maynard. Put a pace on Max Holloway, beat him up, level change, beat him up, level change. If you can get him to the floor, defend the guillotines and then start working that stacking ground and pound. That's when Max Holloway could feel pressured, could start to slow down early and can take damage that will affect him in the championship rounds.
Good stuff. What a fight this is. I know that Frankie's a big favourite of yours and, of course, up against the champion. This is great for him. Different look to try and finally get his hands on the title. That'll give him 2 belts over the history as well. That's quite an achievement. So keep the conversation going using the hashtag Inside the Octagon, the Twitter handle at UFC Europe. We also have a hashtag ITO Extra Show for UFC 240. Check that out. Thank you very much to Dan. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.